we and the league track injury data every single year. So you can go back the last 11 straight years. And for 11 straight years, grass has had a lower injury rate than turf.
Walking this like, hey, yeah, I'm really him. Talking my shit like, hey.
What is going on, guys? This is Justin Pugh. Welcome to Net Worth, my show talking about the ecosystem between fans and players. The business of sports is what we do here. We just keep one-upping ourselves. Last week, we had our biggest week on the channel. We've set another record. 500 new subscribers last week. That puts us over 1,000. Our goal was 1,000. So now that's 2 giveaways that I owe you guys. One for the 500, one for the 1,000, and we will get to the giveaway later in this video. A lot of new subscribers came from Talking Giants. I jumped on their podcast with Justin and Bobby. Go check out that episode. We'll drop it in the link below. It was a great show. We're talking everything New York Giants. I appreciate you guys giving me the plug, giving me the Talking Giants versus the world subscriber bump. I appreciate you guys. Look forward to getting back on your show soon. Let's just keep doubling our subscribers. Let's just do it. Let's go for 2,000. Let's get to 2,000 subscribers. That is our next goal. I'm excited about hitting that one. I know we're going to blow that one out of the water. I probably got to join some more podcasts to keep getting those bumps, just like Talking Giants did for me. I appreciate it. We got Monday Night Football coming up with the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, you guys probably saw the game last night. Unbelievable win for the Packers. They're riding a high right now. It looked cold in Green Bay. I got some friends and family coming to the game, so I'm excited for that. I'm excited for them to get out here. It's gonna be a great game. Today is going to be a little bit longer of an episode. We got my first guest coming on, and we will get to that shortly. But it's going to be a little bit different. We're not going to do a what's happening. We're going to move some things around, but I think you guys will like it. If you don't, tell us. Either way, we'll figure it out. I'm really excited for our first guest. There's nobody that knows the business of football better than this guest. He is a guy that I've known. We got drafted right around the same time, actually the same draft class. Both are Central New York guys. And this is one thing that I'll preface. If I'm going to continue to bring guests on, we need to continue to grow the channel. And that's something that I learned from Talking Giants. No one wants to come onto a small channel that's not getting the same publicity. So make sure you guys are subscribing. If you guys like this content, comment, like, and most importantly, subscribe. As we grow the channel, I'll be able to get bigger and bigger guests on the channel. But without further ado, let's hop into it. Like I said, 9-year NFL veteran, drafted by the Green Bay Packers out of Cornell University. Similar to me, drafted in the 2013 draft, ended up playing and signing with the Cleveland Browns. He is our current president of the NFLPA union, JC Tretter. Let's get to that part. All right, guys, let's welcome JC Tretter to the show. JC, thanks for coming on Net Worth. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Good to talk to you. Good to see you. It's been a little bit of time, so it's great to be here.
Yeah, man. It seems like the offensive linemen. I mean, we went from Eric Winston as the president to you as the president. Why are offensive linemen always the ones heavily involved in the union? Is there some type of study we've done to figure that out?
I don't know. I'd like to say we're the best looking guys, so we just get the votes, but that's probably not the truth. But Eric was great. Led for 6 years, I think, as president. I'm on year 4, so I think we've lived up to the standard. I hope, at least. But no, it's been a huge honor to be in this position for 4 years now.
Yeah, how did you end up getting started with the NFLPA? I know you were a rep to start. How many years have you been involved? Kind of give me the breakdown on how that went for you.
Yeah, so I started, I guess, with unions. I went to Cornell and studied industrial labor relations. So, a lot of that is unionizing, a little bit of law in there too. So it was always kind of part of my background. And then as I got older and more established in the league, I always knew I wanted to get more involved with the PA. I signed with Cleveland, had a contract, felt secure, made it through some early injury woes. And then I became an alternate rep for the Browns. And after 2 years there, I wanted to get more involved. And I'm kind of somebody that if I'm getting involved with something, I want to get fully involved in it and throw myself into it. So I had kind of the discussion going into the 2020 rep meeting of what do I want to do? Originally, I thought I would run for the executive committee. And then early in the off season, I was like, screw it. Like, I want to run for president. Like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. I did not know. I knew the CBA was out for a vote. I knew there was going to be some tumultuous times probably, but I didn't know COVID was 3 days away from happening when I took over. So that, I wasn't exactly running on that platform. But again, like I said, I probably will struggle more transitioning out of my role as president than I did retiring from football. Like, I've absolutely loved this role and this job and these responsibilities and kind of fighting for all the players around the league. So it'll be a tough thing to say goodbye to.
No, it was a funny story because I've been a rep. Zach Diassi, former executive committee member, got me involved in my years in New York. I was there when you got voted in. I voted for you, just so you know. But when you got up and you said Cornell and that you majored in labor relations, I think it caught everybody off guard. And they were like, wait, we've had the guy in the room this whole time. There was a few other guys that got up and spoke, but when you got up there and gave your presentation, I think it was a home run. So we're glad to have you. But can you quickly just break down for our listeners and maybe some of the players that are out there listening, what is a union and why is a union so important, especially for a players union?
Yeah, so I think we'll start with just a broad definition of a union. So we, as any other union, fight for wages, benefits, and working conditions. Everything falls in those buckets. So we talk about minimum salary cap, your pension, your 401k, but also your working conditions, which look a lot of like the safety things we do, concussion protocols, making sure when you have a situation like Damar Hamlin, we have people in that or on that field ready to save his life. That all came from the union making sure those people were qualified and ready for those moments. And that's our job. I think the next step when you look at what is a union, and I think this is what some guys lose track of in the league, the NFLPA are the 2,000 players that make up the locker room. I know sometimes we kind of get it twisted where it's like, oh, the PA is the staff that works in DC and then we're the players. And it's a disconnect there. The PA is the players. We have a staff that works for us full time in order to get things done. But everything is run and led by the players. And if you go to our leadership, I'm the president elected from the board. I have a 10-person executive committee elected from the board. And then the board are members of every locker room that are elected by their locker room. So the players are at the center of every decision that is made. That's how this works. The staff then executes our decisions to make sure, luckily right now I don't have a day job, so I can do this pretty much full time. For the most part, a lot of guys who are board members and EC members have day jobs of playing football. So having a staff there to execute is great. But we are there to handle any single issue that comes up for players and making sure that our players are protected.
Now, like you mentioned, not having a day job, alluding to the fact that you're not playing at the moment. Have you thought about playing? You want to break some news here real quick?
No, I am now down to 230 pounds. So unless the team's looking for a slow white blocking tight end, I think my options are limited. So I'm good. Now in year 2 out of the league and body feels good. I'm enjoying what I'm doing now. So there'll be no late returnee for me.
So how does that work in terms of being the president of the union? Obviously, you said you've been out of the league for 2 years. How does that work in terms of how long your tenure can be as a former player? How does that work out?
Yeah, so the rule is you have to run for the executive committee or the president's role. You have to have been on the roster the year before you run. So I was on the Cleveland Browns. I ran while I was on the Cleveland Browns. I was elected while I was on the Cleveland Browns. The day I flew home from rep meeting, I got the call that I was getting cut. And then I've really been a former player since the day after I was elected, but I had every interest in continuing to play at that time. I was thinking I was going to continue to play. And then for me, it kind of got to that moment of, I think I'm done. I don't want to play anymore. But I really wanted to kind of throw myself into this role. Now I live in the DC area where the offices are. I try to be as hands-on of a president as we've had to make sure that the guys are getting the information they need, that they're being represented the way they want to be represented. And like I said, it's been a huge honor to be put in this position because it is a very important position, and the stuff we're talking about and the deals we're making impact not just players playing now, but players that are playing well into the future, generations ahead of time.
And is that a unique thing? I mean, you just kind of mentioned that you're living in the area where the offices are. have other presidents moved down to where the offices are? I feel like that is a huge commitment, and hats off to you for doing that. As a player that's a union rep, hats off to you. But is that something that typically happens with the president? You're moving down and you're in the offices, or is this a kind of a unique situation?
I the area. I'm not sure when he, Eric kind of bounced around at the end of his career where he was kind of jumping on rosters at the end of the year. So I'm not sure when he moved, but he lives in the area now. And weirdly enough, I think also Dominique Foxworth, who's another former president, lives in the area now. So I think maybe it just, you become president and this place just attracts you to it. So I don't know, but I enjoy kind of stopping down to the office about once a week, doing some meetings. We have a new executive director who I'm extremely excited about, who I think is going to lead us well into the future and has a really good idea of how this place should work moving forward. So really this kind of last half of the year, my sole focus is just getting him up to speed, making sure he's ready to take over and run with it. And he's done a great job. He's gotten out to all the teams to meet with each locker room to make sure they know him, he knows their issues. And now his job is to make sure the staff understand those issues and have a plan to execute on those issues.
That kind of segues me right into my next question. So from a standpoint of executive director and president, how do you guys sit in the union? Like from a structure standpoint, I think a lot of people with D and just being in the league for the past 11 years, it's like, oh, we respond to him. How does the structure work between the president, executive committee, even the elected officials from all the teams and the union itself, like the staff side?
So I will start. All the power of this union are in the hands of the board. So those 32 voting reps out of each locker room are the decision makers. So the EC and the president, though, are in all the conversations and do a lot of the negotiating. We don't have the power to make the actual decisions. The board has that power, as they should, because they're representing their individual locker rooms. So, all the power there rests with the board. The EC, though, I kind of always describe them as the kind of old wise men of the union, where their job is to be extremely educated on union issues, extremely educated on, the facts and the figures. And then they bring kind of ideas and negotiated thoughts back to the board to say, hey, this is the issue. This is what we think is best. You're the decision maker. You tell us how you want us to proceed. And the board is kind of our checks and balances of, yep, we like that. Keep going down that rabbit hole or keep pushing that forward. And then when you bring in the staff and the executive director, if it's working right, I think they work hand in hand. We hire the executive director, but the executive director is our leader. So it's kind of a circular relationship, but the ED should know that the players are the ones that run the union, and his job is to execute what they're asking him to. And now we want somebody who's smart and has seen a lot and has ideas too, to help us with those ideas. But that's kind of how the leadership sets up, where the power of voting is in the hands of the board. But the work happens mostly with the EC and the executive director, and then they bring the board up to speed. That way the board doesn't have to be on kind of 12 hours of calls every week, learning about the nuances of every issue before we present it to them.
But it's key to remember, guys, and I hope you guys caught that the players run the union. This is our union. If there's nothing we can get across throughout this entire segment, I think that would be one of the key components.
And let me just add one more thing to that. I think one of my favorite stories from my 4 years goes back to COVID. And we talk about how do we get guys involved, or what does involvement look like? And we just talked about leadership, and it's not always leadership, right? And it's not always when we talk about getting players involved with the union or making a stand, it's not a strike where you're giving up paychecks. It looks different. And I think it goes back to the COVID negotiations where we got down to close to reporting for training camp. We had yet to have kind of a past COVID plan, and everybody was upset. The board was upset. The EC was upset. The membership was upset. We were holding 1,000 player update calls twice a week, and they were boiling over with frustration. And finally, a group of players, mostly star players, reached out to me and said, hey, can we have a private call and figure out what's going on? Yeah. So get on call with about 40 big name players and gave them the rundown of this is where we stand in the negotiations. And their thought was, what can we do to help? And I said, you guys can use your voice because you guys are the players. So it's easy for me to sit across from Roger and the owners and yell at them, but it's not going to make a big deal or make a big difference. But if I got a bunch of players saying, yeah, this is a problem, we're not happy, that changes things for us. And then you saw that kind of tweet storm of 400 players tweeting out their discomfort with going into this COVID season without a clear plan. They wanted the NFL to follow their experts' plan that the NFL was saying they wouldn't. And almost immediately, the NFL gave up and said, fine, take those things, no preseason games, no joint practices. You get your 48-day ramp up. All of those things the players wanted, we got. And that came from a 30-second tweet. So when we talk about getting involved with the union, doesn't mean you have to be president, doesn't mean you have to be on the EC, doesn't even mean you have to be on the board. But when something's important, realize you do have some level of power and ability to help the decision makers and the leaders get you what you want. And that's really what it comes down to, is we knew what the guys wanted and we were working to get it, but they kind of pushed us over the hump of getting us actually what they want.
So now when we move from like workplace conditions and going through the COVID situation, then we get to the dollars and cents of the league. And can you really break down the difference within our union for the structure of the for-profit entity and the not-for-profit entity, and kind of distinguish between the two?
Yeah, so we have our union, nonprofit, or we're running a union. Then we have the for-profit called Players Inc., which runs our marketing and licensing side. Unique thing about our union is we are one of, if not the only union that's not run off of dues. So players pay dues into the union. That's not how we pay salaries. That's not how we keep the lights on. We pay for all of that through Players Inc., the money brought in through group licensing. All the dues money that every player pays goes into our war chest, which is there for when there's going to be a fight, what there inevitably will be, whether it's a lockout or a strike. We have a war chest built up of money that we can keep that fight going. And I think an interesting story that probably most players and fans don't know about it brings me back to the Quarterbacks Club. So back years ago when there was a fight over free agency, we were winning lawsuits, but we were still very young as a union. We did not have a lot of money. And we were funding those lawsuits through our group licensing agreement. And the league looked at it as, okay, we keep losing these lawsuits. How do we stop this process? So they sent a guy to locker room with a bag of money and offered star players money to leave the group license. Because if the group license goes away, then the union doesn't have any way to fund the union anymore, and we don't have enough money to sue anymore. And that was the league's plan to get rid of it. And unfortunately, it worked. Guys took that and backed out of the group license, and we eventually had to fight to get them back in so we could keep funding the lawsuits. And we end up getting free agency, and the history's there. But that's why it's so important when you talk about having that Players Inc. side that is bringing in money through the group licensing. It really, at a time when we were really struggling, it was what was keeping us afloat as we were fighting for something as critical as free agency.
It was all the quarterbacks, or were there other stars involved?
There were other stars involved. It's coined the Quarterbacks Club, but there were others. But the quarterbacks, as we all know, hold a ton of leverage and a ton of power in any of those groups. Having the quarterbacks involved is critical to do anything.
And if any quarterbacks are out there, we miss you guys at the meetings. We would love to see you there. You don't have to say anything about it. All right. So now we know that we have this for-profit entity. We have the union side, which are two unrelated businesses. Our dues as players goes into the union war chest, which then could be used down the road for pulling different levers to help us. Could you give us an example of what that war chest will be used for?
Yeah. So if you go back to the 2011 lockout, we purchased lockout insurance, which was like a novel idea. And it was done somewhat in secret because we didn't want the owners to know we had it, because during those type of lockouts or strikes, both sides are just doing math equations of how long can the other group last. So the league, I think, thought, okay, we know what their number is. We know where they stand. We know how far they could go, and we can outlast them. And we used that money to buy a bigger policy that if we get locked out, now we have insurance to pay more players and have a longer runway before we run out of money. And that was dropped on the owner's desk late in the process where they had no idea it was there. And all of a sudden they had to come to grips with, we've been making all these assumptions about how long the players can last without playing football. and all of our numbers are wrong because we did not know they had this policy. So those type of situations we've been used. We've talked about, would we ever have enough money to pay players salaries instead of playing, or do we have a way of at least covering insurance in those cases? Because when you talk about a lockout, I think one of my frustrations when the media talks about lockouts is they kind of just talk about it like, they're locked out, but the season isn't starting for another 4 months, so it doesn't really matter. But when you get locked out, your benefits turn off. So you have players with wives who are going to have babies in March, and now, sorry, you have no more insurance. So lockouts are real things. They're not just, well, are they going to miss games or they're not going to miss games? They do put a stress on the workers themselves. So having money there to purchase plans or help guys get money or get by and keep the lights on is critical to any fight.
No, that's huge. And obviously, players need to realize this too, the Madden Check. And that's one of the ways we get guys into meetings sometimes. And we've already established that the players are the union. But what is the Madden Check and why are guys so excited about it? And how does that kind of factor in this whole equation?
Yeah, so that's an equal share royalty check. So we call it the Madden Check because it's catchy and that's where a lot of the money comes from is the Madden game. But that is what Players Inc. then goes out and gets all these deals, and then we split it equally so every player gets the same. Now, it's not exactly equal because the guys that sell more jerseys get a cut of those jerseys. So it varies a little bit, but the core of it, I think this year was around like $32,000 for every player in the league, which is a big amount of money. And we want to keep pushing that number higher and higher. But that is Players Inc. going out and signing good deals and pushing, our licensing and marketing higher and higher. And they've done that year over year. We've built that up even in the course of my 9-year career from where it started to where it is now is a much higher number. I want to say it's probably close to double what it was less than a decade ago.
When we first came into the league, it definitely has doubled since then.
Yeah.
And now that we kind of have the juices flowing, the business, the dollars and cents, I was a finance major. So obviously this is the part of the business that interests me the most and kind of why I started this podcast. We see so many former teammates of ours, former players going through financial struggles. So I love to talk about how dollars are made and how dollars are split amongst the players. Could you give us a breakdown on the NFL as a whole? How do we make our money? I kind of view it as like a hopper, and dollars come into the hopper from different avenues and how they're split up and how it trickles down to the players. Because I have a few examples we can touch on, but could you give us a breakdown on how dollars come in and where they go from there?
Yeah, I'll try to give it like a high level math lesson here. So we are a revenue sharing business. So all football revenue that's brought in by the NFL, we split. We get 48.23% of all that money that's brought in. So if we kind of put some numbers to it, let's say the league brings in $18 billion in revenue. We get 48.23% of that, which if we're just rounding here, I think that's about, I think I took some notes, $8.6 billion will be our share. And that is covering any money that goes to players from there. So if you then move to the salary cap, which is a big portion of that 8.6, about 80% of it goes to the cap, which would be about $6.9 billion of that 8.6, which is about 216 per club. But the other 20% goes to benefits, which is about 54 million per club. And that pays for the 401k match, the pension plan, the annuity, the cap plan, player performance, all of these things go into it. So any money that goes to players is out of that 48.23%. So whenever there's a new idea or a new benefit that comes up that says, hey, we could try to do something like this, the next question is, how do we pay for it? Because our 48.23% is fully funded right now. All that money is being covered. So if there's a new idea that we want to cover, we have two choices. Either you take money out of the cap to pay for it, which all has to get negotiated with the league. You get rid of one benefit to create another benefit. Or when you get back to negotiations, you need to get to 49 or 50 or 51%, which then opens up more ability or more room to put in more benefits. But all of that stuff, preseason pay, postseason pay, Pro Bowl pay, all that stuff are benefits. Those aren't part of your salary. And I think sometimes guys get confused about that. And one of the questions you always get is, well, is it fair that, Patrick Mahomes goes from making, millions of dollars every week to then you get to the postseason, he's making 40 grand. And it's like fair is a subjective term. Would we want, seeing how that comes out of everybody's share of benefits, would we want to then say we're going to pay everybody their same 1/17th or 1/18th share for each playoff game? But that means the cap gets slashed for every other team. So even if you don't make the playoffs, now you have to make less so they can make substantially more. So it always is a complex math equation, but we get 48.23%, and anything that we get is from that 48.23%.
Well, that leads me to my next point, because we were watching the Amazon Black Friday showcase with the Jets and the Dolphins, and we saw that Amazon had paid $100 million. Now, there's some back end reasons why Amazon decided to pay that much dollars for that. They created a new, TV viewing experience for football on Black Friday. So that $100 million would then go into the pot. The players then, through salary cap and benefits, would get the 48.23%. So technically, all the players benefit when the Dolphins and Jets play on that Black Friday game. Is that correct?
Correct. So the same thing. I know there was a big, when the NFL signed the YouTube Sunday ticket deal. There was a segment of some players, fans, media that were like, man, like the PA is getting screwed. This new deal got signed. They don't get a piece of it. We get a piece of all of it. Like anything that comes in that's football related, gate, tickets, media, broad, like all of that stuff, we get a piece of. And we want them to sign huge deals, because the bigger deals they sign, the bigger piece we get. And even in this last CBA, we started at 48%. And we negotiated in a media kicker, which said, if your deals for the TV contracts are bigger this time around than last time, we want not only us to get a bigger pie, but a bigger piece of the pie. So that's the reason we're at 48.23%, is that extra 0.23% has come from the league signing bigger deals than they did before, which increased our share as well, which was great for us. Now we have a bigger pie and a bigger piece of the pie.
So it all ends up trickling down through either benefits or salary. So no matter where you see dollars coming in, they all make their way down. Is there any areas in which, and I know there was like some different buckets, is there any areas in which like a guy like Jerry Jones, so the Dallas Cowboys maybe have the best brand in football when it comes to terms of generating dollars? Is there any way that owners can make money off of the likeness or the image of the organization, like the Cowboys or the New York Giants, for example, that the players wouldn't see?
I think the big argument on that stuff is as these owners have turned their stadiums into destinations where they've got all these other businesses around it, and people are coming to the stadium for clearly the football team, but then they're spending money at all the other things the owner owns around it. How does that get defined? And there's a ton of debate about that, but that's where a lot of that nuance comes in. Same thing with gambling. We get a percentage of all the gambling money, but it's limited to a sports book in or around the facility. If Jerry Jones owned a sports book in Austin, we don't treat that as football revenue. So there are some nuances to that type of thing.
Well, that kind of leads me to my next topic, the fantasy football and gambling. And the last thing I think we're going to touch on is health and player safety, which to me and probably to you is one of the most important, if not the most important piece of this puzzle. So I'll briefly touch on the fantasy football and sports and gambling, and then we'll circle back on it. So you mentioned that. And the one thing that I've seen in the fantasy football world this year, or the gambling world across all sports, and I'm not expecting you to have a golden ball to tell us exactly how this would shake out, but is there a way that we can, you already mentioned all the dollars come in and we get our 48.23% of all those dollars. So fantasy football is good for the game. The gambling that we get our piece of is good for the game and good for the players. But how can we control this narrative of the fans and the interaction between fans and players? Because it is important. We do benefit from these dollars, but how do we keep it PG, maybe PG-13. Maybe there's some words we can let slide in there, because I've seen some interactions where, I'm an offensive lineman. I don't deal with the fantasy football phenomenon where fans are sliding into my DMs or posting or reaching out to my family members. But how do we keep that to protect our players, but also grow the game and grow the dollars? Because like you said, we do get benefits from that.
Yeah, I think civil is probably the right word. How do we keep it civil?
There we go.
And it's... I kind of look at it as a societal issue too, and a social media issue. Is you get the guys that it's really easy to say things and some really messed up things to people when you can hide behind a profile and not say it to their face. And again, the guys are, are doing their job. And I always try to reiterate that with players is it's easy to say we play a game and it's a childhood game, but it's a job. And guys are doing their job. And we love that fans play fantasy football and gamble, and new eyeballs are being attracted to our game, which help us. But in the end, we're still doing our jobs. And our job isn't related to what they're doing. So I think that's where the disconnect gets, where you get the fantasy guys, the parlay guys who are like, hey, I had you to go over 49 and a half yards. You screwed me. It's like, man, I'm just trying to do my job here. And like, I think part of it's that kind of society thing where there are a lot of messed up things that are said on social media and DMs because people feel embrazen to do that, and feel like there's no checks and balances to do that because they can say whatever they want. And that happens everywhere and it sucks. And like you said, I'm an offensive lineman. Nobody was coming after me. There's no over under on how many snaps I make in a game. So it's all right. But no, I don't think there's an answer other than like, we as a society need to be better, and we need to understand as players, we love people being involved. We love fans. There'll be some back and forth. And I think sometimes it's fun. Sometimes the trash talk back and forth with the fans like that, feeling like they're in the ecosystem. But there's always that line that eventually gets crossed, and players get frustrated when, people are mad they have a bad game. They're mad because they feel like they let their teammates down, or they feel like they let themselves down. And then you get the guy being like, you also let me down because I, on the sidelines, bet on you too. And it's like, dude, I don't want to hear that right now. Like, I'm mad about the real thing. Like, we're trying to win a Super Bowl and you're telling me about this like random 50-cent 45 leg parlay that I screwed up for you. And like, I don't want to hear that right now. So no, I don't think there's a good answer for how we correct it, other than I think everybody needs a little more decency and a little more civility as they interact with each other.
No, I agree. We had an idea that you almost have a driver's license. That's like your civil internet. That you have to identify yourself. You have to verify who you are. And if you get a certain amount of points, or you say things to people and it gets reported, you can get banned from some of these sites. And I think sites like DraftKings and enter all the other names. I don't know all of them, but they also have a responsibility to protect this ecosystem that we're talking about, because there's so many dollars to be generated. We don't want to, make anyone mad. But players out there, just remember, when that guy's betting on you, you're getting your 48.23%. So maybe, you cut him a little slack and just realize where he's coming from. But fans, come on, take it down a notch. We don't need to see any of that anymore.
Yeah.
No, but that's awesome. So, that touches on that. I think it's, it's such a slippery slope when you get into that space that it really creates a line in the sand. And we won't dive into it anymore because I really want to hop into health and player safety and kind of where that goes. The one thing that I always hear from players is, why don't we have, and as you get older, the question that's coming, as you phase out of the league, why don't we have lifetime healthcare? And is it even possible? So I guess first off, what do we have currently that guys, get as they transition out of the league? And then answer that next question of, can we do lifetime healthcare?
Yes, what we currently have is, if you're a vested player, played more than 3 years, you get 5 years post-career healthcare. So that's what I have right now. Played more than 3 years. I now have the same exact plan. I didn't have to do anything. I just rolled right into it. I have healthcare for the next 5 years. We also put a ton of money into our HRAs through the CBA. So every year you play, you dump a huge amount of money into an HRA, a health reimbursement account, that then you can use anywhere you'd like for different things, whether it's buying back insurance. If I just wanted to buy back into our plan, I think I could get like another 8 years into our plan with how much money I have in my HRA. So really, I could get 13 years straight of post-career healthcare after I'm done playing. But the nice thing about an HRA is it gives you the wiggle room for each individual situation. So maybe in 5 years, I have a job and I have healthcare through my job. Now I don't want to have insurance through the league because now I'm double insured. I would rather have that from some other benefit. So then if I worked from ages 40 to 50, then I could pay for healthcare out of my HRA, and now I'm covered from 50 to 58 instead of being double covered. We also, a new thing in this last CBA, have a designated hospital network, which has been getting very high reviews and high marks for former players. So if you're a vested former player, you have access to hospital networks in every city that a team's located in. and you get like up to $25,000 in mental health services, up to $25,000 per year in primary care services. So there's a ton of different details in that. And it's more concierge. And I think that's part of it too, where you call a number and say, hey, I need to see a chiropractor. And they figure it out, say, where do you live? Okay, this is who we got. This is when you can get in. And they handle all for you. And that's something I've learned as a former guy. As a current guy, you can walk into your facility and be like, hey, man, like I'd like to go to the dentist. And they'd be like, give us a second. You're there in 2 hours. Go ahead and head over. Now I call and it's like, hey, I'd like to make a dentist appointment. They're like, what are you doing in August of 25? And it's like, oh, crap. So the concierge part is definitely a benefit. So that's what we offer now. When you get to lifetime healthcare, I think we start with, we hear you guys. I've found traced back to, I think, 2005. I've found emails going back and forth talking about lifetime healthcare and whether we can get it. So this has been something the union's been looking at for almost 2 decades. The issue that we learned in the last CBA was right now the answer is no, we can't get it. So one, there is no insurance company that is willing to give us lifetime healthcare. They're willing to maybe get started, but not say that you'll have this benefit for life, which is the whole part of lifetime healthcare that matters, is knowing that you have it forever. And then when you look at the cost of it, hypothetically, as we work through actuaries of what could this actually cost, it would be a sizable amount that we would, again, either have to get rid of benefits or slash the cap substantially to pay for this huge sum of money to pay for it. Again, we've got a huge number of current and former players. Our game is violent and dangerous, and we're all kind of nursing injuries. So healthcare companies don't want to kind of hitch their wagons to a group of guys that are admittedly banged up when they leave the game. So that's where the issue comes. And then I go back, I think there was a study in the kind of 2009, maybe, from the University of Michigan. And they said that 91% of former NFL players have healthcare, whether that's through their 5 years post-career healthcare, whether that's through their HRA, whether that's through them or their spouse having a job, which then gives them healthcare. So if that number's true, which I've already talked to the staff about, like redoing that study to see where we are now in 2023 and 2024 soon. If those numbers hold steady, where 91% of our players have healthcare naturally, then paying a ton of money out of the cap or canceling other benefits for 91% that already have it isn't a wise financial decision. It really is look to how do we supplement the 9% that need it. And that's why you look at building up those hospital networks, building up the HRAs, building up these different policies that then can help the people that need it, while building up the other benefits around it for the people who don't.
So I guess one of the benefits that would help those guys in that 9% or just overall in general is workers' compensation. And it's something that a lot of guys I've found throughout my career don't file. It's different from state to state. Could you give us a quick, synopsis on how workers' comp plays a role in all this and how that could help protect some of these guys and not have them diving into their HRA to pay for a surgery down the road, and why it is so important to file it every single year?
Yeah. So again, we are a workplace. We are workers. We have a job. And just like any job, we're afforded the same rights as other workers. So when you're injured on the job, which 100% of us are, you are entitled to workers' comp. And now each state differs when it comes to how many years you have. And the reason that's important to note is you should file at the end of every year, because you might have played in, when I first got to Green Bay, I think the statute of limitations was like 13 years. And then some states it's 1 year. So they vary state to state. So at the end of every season, you should call your workers' comp attorney. We send that information out to every player, and you should go and get looked at and file for all your injuries, because then you're protected. And if those issues are ongoing and you need a surgery down the line, that is then paid for. So your injuries stemming from your work are covered lifetime as long as you follow the workers' comp process and do it. So the workers' comp thing is a crucial part of that healthcare bucket for the guys that have knees and ankles and elbows and shoulders and hips that inevitably most of us will have. Documenting those and filing your workers' comp claims will then protect you all throughout the rest of your life to make sure you're not paying out of pocket or out of your HRA for that.
No, that's perfect. And I do an episode on that earlier in the year because as I was transitioning out, obviously dealing with a lot of those questions. So that's the number one thing that I always recommend to guys is every year, make sure you're following your workers' comp. And then if there's any questions, obviously reach out to your reps. JC has a team around him that can help out. So the last question we're going to touch on, and maybe the most sensitive to players in the league right now, it just seems like every week there's something popping up, is the turf versus the grass dilemma. Can we dive into that? I mean, I guess the question, and I'm maybe playing a little devil's advocate, if you're an owner, why wouldn't you want to have the best turf possible? What plays a role in all this? I know certain places it's just impossible to maybe grow and maintain, and the cost. Could you dive into kind of how we're tackling that? And I'm going to ask a personal question because I play on one of the turfs that's at the circle of this dilemma or the center of this dilemma, and maybe we'll touch on the MetLife turf situation here at the end.
Yeah, so I think we'll start with just some facts. So we track injury data. We and the league track injury data every single year. So you can go back the last 11 straight years. The injury rate for lower extremity non-contact injuries, because again, for a lot of these, if you're standing there and a guy hits you in the knee, very rarely is the turf or the grass responsible. So looking at the non-contact is kind of how you track this. And for 11 straight years, grass has had a lower injury rate than turf. 2 years ago, the lines became closer than they ever become before, off by like 0.01 on injury rate. And the league did a giant kind of victory lap saying the problem solved, look at this. What they didn't add in that was the rates came together mostly because grass had an anomaly year of high injury rates. So turf didn't really get any safer. Grass just looked like it got more dangerous. And our big point was, well, let's let more than 1 year go by before we do this victory parade. And then the next year, now the lines are as far apart as they've ever been. The gap between the two surfaces are far apart, as we expected it to be. So that's kind of the data, and that's clear cut. And I think if you start looking at individual stadiums, which sometimes the league will come out and say, well, there are high performing turf fields and low performing grass. It's like that. But the grass, and 9 of the worst 11 fields are turf. So yeah, there's 2 down there and 2 down there that throw off the numbers, but you get the gist of it, of what it looks like. And then the next part that doesn't get eaten up in this data is the player experience. And the players have been very clear about this. By the end of my career, my knees were in bad shape. I knew how my body felt playing on grass versus playing on turf. And my knees would be swollen. I wouldn't be able to sleep, wouldn't be able to run. I'd have to get them drained every week to get the fluid out so I could bend them. And that doesn't pop up in the non-contact lower extremity soft tissue injuries. That just kind of goes away. And when you ask the players, I would say the vast majority, well over 90% of guys say they prefer to play on grass than turf. Those are the facts. And then it gets to why. One of the pieces is money. It costs more to maintain a grass field than a turf field. Now you would say, or you should say, well, isn't losing your star quarterback because of an injury who's you're paying $50 million worth way more or cost you way more than the marginal $1 million that's going to cost you? Yeah, it does. So it's a weird response we get from them. The next part is the whole non-football revenue part of it. The league and the teams, when we talk about football revenue versus non-football revenue, what goes into our bucket and what doesn't go into our bucket, the team hosting a Taylor Swift concert at their stadium is non-football revenue. So they also are incentivized to have it easier to be able to put on monster truck rallies and concerts and major events at their stadiums so they can bring in more money. That doesn't go to us. We get nothing out of that. But having a turf surface that you can roll in and roll out and put concrete or put hard floors down and not have any problems, that's better for them. When it gets to the whole whether you can or can't, there are a few stadiums that I agree. Like Detroit's one I always point to. I've been there plenty when I was playing in Green Bay. There's no way you're fitting an 120-yard tray like in Arizona or like in Vegas. That place is in its own little cavity. So there are some issues that we're probably never going to be easily be able to flip to grass. But we grow grass in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and Chicago, and Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. So some of these other stadiums that are outdoor that you easily could if you prioritized it, I think that's where a lot of the guys' frustration's at, where Cincinnati should be grass. New England should be grass. Then you start moving south. Carolina, who was grass, has moved to turf. Tennessee, who was grass, has moved to turf. Both of them have said, well, it's too hard to grow grass here, which is one of the craziest things I've ever heard, when these owners are like, yeah, Tennessee and Carolina are really tough to grow grass here. It's like, I'm pretty sure that's the ideal spot to grow grass. If they can grow grass in Green Bay, Wisconsin, but you're saying, Tennessee can't do it, I don't know what that means. So I think that's where a lot of like the hypocriticalness of the whole thing comes, where, you can grow grass. It's a choice not to. And you kind of ducking and using the data to tell you a different story when really it's money related. It's all based off, I want to bring in more money for concerts and monster truck rallies. And I know it's not as good for the players.
I got you. Do you think there ever will be like a minimum standard where it's like, hey, in the next CBA, I mean, do you see that being an initiative? Obviously guys have been very loud about it. Our mutual friend, Dave Bakhtiari, he's talked about it at length, having dealt with some of those injuries, where not only is there a minimum on the field with like, hey, we have to have grass, or it has to be this type of turf, like whatever the best turf out there, if places like Detroit, but you've been in some of these away locker rooms. A few pop into mind that may not even be around anymore, but like New Orleans, the Mercedes. I remember having to get in a baby pool for the hot tub. The old Raiders Stadium. I mean, just some of these places. Is there ever going to be a minimum standard where guys can get ready for a game? Because when you look back at it, the performance of the players matters. People have fantasy football implications, sports gambling implications. So when you go to the owners and say, hey, if we want to increase the dollars going into this bucket, don't we think we should have like a minimum standard? Or maybe it's putting roofs over all the stadiums so we don't have snow games that can impact certain things. What do you think about that when people bring that up?
Yeah, so one, we'll start with minimum standards for grass and turf. So that's something we've been actively working on, because our win here is not all stadiums are grass and it's bad grass. Like, that's not a win. We want the highest quality of the surface. So we're working on a test that will be able to compare both grass and turf evenly to say, these are our metrics that are performance and health and safety metrics that every field, whether you're grass or turf, has to live up to. So we're progressing through there. We want to be there quickly, where we have this test that we can test every single field to make sure it lives up to. For the fields that can't go to grass, making sure it's one uniform type of turf. That way you're practicing on that turf, you're playing on that turf. I know, like, I could feel the difference on some of those fields. Like, I remember like SoFi, it's almost, I describe it as like a shag carpet that you mow down. Like, it's way shorter than the other turf around the league. It's like weird. So all those turfs should be the same. When you get to the stadiums and the facilities, that's another thing we've been talking about too, where it's tough to have uniformity because footprints are different, but there's got to be some sort of minimum standard. You shouldn't be in garbage cans as your cold tubs. Like, there should be some understanding that this is a NFL high quality, facility and team, and you're providing at least room for guys to be able to change and get warmed up and stretch. And there are some facilities that are not good. They are not good. And I think that came out, not just the away facilities, but it came out in the survey data of even some of the home facilities that you would think they have every reason to provide the top tier standards to. We're lagging well behind what people from the outside would think, like, oh, NFL teams, probably the highest level of like performance and quality of food and treatment and all that. And that's why those surveys were so interesting, I think, because people were like, oh, well, okay, this is not what I thought it was. These are vastly worse than I thought they were supposed to be.
I think single-handedly the report card was probably one of the shining moments for the NFLPA and for the union and for the players. Obviously, we are the union, because it really put a spotlight. And I came from one of those organizations in Arizona that got some bad reviews, and they've since changed a lot of those reviews. So we're still doing the report cards, right? So we'll continue to do that as we go forward.
Yep. So we did it again this year. Those will come out once we get all the data punched and figured out. But I think they're important. And again, the whole point of those report cards isn't to solely shame poor performing teams. It's also to highlight the high performers. Like Minnesota and Miami last year were off the charts on how well they treat their players. And players should know that. And they should get the credit for that they're doing everything the right way. And in anything, we want there to be some competition. We want owners to look at I want to compete with these other owners to provide the best workplace for players, because I'm always competing for the players. So if I can provide a better treatment room, maybe that makes I get an edge on a guy signing here in free agency. Or if I treat somebody's family better, maybe they're more willing to re-sign here because their wife and their kids love it here. So those things make a tangible difference. And to your point, we did see improvement from Arizona. We did see improvement from like team like Carolina. We did see improvement from Cincinnati. We've seen teams kind of pick up their game a little bit and fix a lot of the issues that were called out in those surveys.
No, that's amazing. And I guess I'll leave you with this. I know we've kind of went a little over time. I appreciate you sticking around. It's been super insightful. I'm learning a lot, and I've had 11 years of being at some of these meetings and learning some of these things. It's great. I encourage every player out there that's listening or watching to maybe be an alternate rep. You don't have to be a rep, but we have rep meetings every year. You can come to those meetings. You can learn a lot about your benefits, the business of sport. If there is, and I'll leave you with this, JC, I'll let you go. If there is one thing you could change about the business of football, the union interactions, what would that be? I mean, you've seen the inner workings. You don't have to give me any trade secrets. I know when you become president, they tell you, who shot JFK, but I don't need to know that. But just what is something that has surprised you or been intriguing?
I wish that kind of common sense or pragmatic changes were easier to make. And that's not a shot at the league, because I think we both own some fault in that. I think we've been, we've had our fists and gloves up for a while now, but there are things that are either win-wins or win neutrals that shouldn't be as hard to get through or over the line. I think one of the things we're working on is increasing the number of trainers at every facility. Like that, everybody gets, like, the players get better treatment. The coaches get more available players. The owners get more use of the players they're paying a ton of money to. Like, there is no negative to that. Everybody wins. So it shouldn't be hard to agree to raise the minimum amount of trainers that have to be at every facility from what it is currently to what it should be. Like, OTAs is something we talk about, where there is a better way to do the offseason program than what we're currently doing. And better looks like more prepared players, better coached players, healthier players, which again is great for players, is great for coaches, is great for the league. There are things like that. You go to something as small as like the marijuana policy. Like, what are we doing? Where are we as a country right now? Still testing for it. Why are we taking money out of guys' pockets for it? There are so many things like that that really doesn't cost anything, or nobody's losing in the exchange. That shouldn't be as hard to get through. And there are going to be some things that are hard to get through. When you get to the finances and you get to the split of money and the salary cap negotiations, those things are hard, and they will be a knockdown, drag out fight. But everything doesn't have to be one of those. And I think there are things that we can do from both sides that keep this place moving forward and progressing in a better way. And my hope, and I think this is something that Lloyd, our new executive director, has really pushed, is that approach. He comes from the business side of the world. He looks at everything as like, there are ways to do this. This shouldn't be as hard as it is. Let's try to get to yes, and let's not get bogged down with why we could end at no, but let's look at how we can get to yes. And that's my hope, is as I kind of roll off here in 4 months, the next president and Lloyd will continue to kind of push this forward. And a lot of these things that shouldn't be that hard get done, and everything gets better for the entire ecosystem. The fans have more players to cheer for because they're healthy. The players are healthy. The coaches have their players. The owners have their players on the field. That's what we're fighting for here. And it doesn't have to be as contentious all the time.
I would love that. I mean, because at the end of the day, we all have the same goal: to grow this game, to make this game even better. It's the most popular game in the U.S. Let's continue to dominate that space, to continue to generate dollars. Because at the end of the day, like I always talk about, we are here to make money. We get paid to play on Sundays, so let's maximize that. JC, I really appreciate having you on. I love getting the perspective of the president of our union, an offensive lineman, a guy that I respect tremendously. We thank you for your service. You said you have 4 months left. Is there any grooming? Is there anyone in that's you've seen that may be running for president, or obviously wait till the election time for that?
I think the election will be interesting. Again, I don't think anybody knew I was hanging out there at the last election. So I think there will be somebody that's ready to take up the mantle, and I might not be here in a formal capacity, but I'll be, whoever that next president is, they will have access to me, and I want to help them however I can. So that next person will be stepping into hopefully a less crazy time than I did. But that's also my job right now, is I want to get as much done and off that next person's plate, so they have more time to onboard and learn and get ready for this position, instead of like, hey, solve COVID. Good luck. So I hope they don't have to step into that world.
Well, as a player that has benefited from your hard work, thank you, man. We really appreciate it. I will see you at the union meetings this offseason, and good luck. And if anyone is looking for a tight end out there, slow, white, athletic, though, don't sell yourself short. And slow is a relative term.
I think I could survive enough to get one more year in the pension plan. I could get that. I could get another year of accredited season.
100%. All these teams are running like rollout nakeds where you have to block the backside tight end, or block the backside defensive end. You could do that in a heartbeat.
No doubt. And you give me a couple, maybe 1 or 2 catches for PPR leagues for the fantasy guys that are here looking to get mad at me for something. Get me in there, take some over-unders on my catches. I'll deal with that.
Hey, we'll take our 48.23% all day long. All right, JC, I appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Appreciate you.
All right, I hope you guys liked that segment with JC. Literally nobody knows the business of sports better than JC. He has his inside info on everything that is related to it. What a great episode. For me, it's super refreshing to learn all these things. Even though I've been in the NFLPA and a union rep for years, I still find it fascinating to learn all the different nuances of the game. 48.23%. Make sure you remember that. Every time the fans get into your DM, guys, or fans, the players get 48.23% of every dollar that's generated through the NFL. Thanks for coming on, JC. I appreciate you, brother. You really, really helped out this episode, and we look forward to continue to learn more about it. There's a lot more to dive into. If you guys have any other questions in regards to JC and the comments and the conversation that we had, just feel free to drop those in the comments below. We will get to them. Like I said, this is a longer episode, so I'm not going to get to all the questions that we had from last week. I will do it next week in the episode because there's a few things that I want to dive into. Let's talk about the college football playoffs. My brother texted me. He was like, I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to say in this week's episode. I had a little bit of a controversial take. Maybe I was wrong, but we're going to talk through it. Obviously, we have Michigan, we have Washington, we have Alabama. Well, we have Texas at the 3 seed, and we have Alabama at the 4 seed. So first, I'm going to go through the snubs. Florida State and Georgia. My brother is a Florida State fan. He lives down in Florida. Obviously, he's close to it. There's a few facts about the Florida State snub that I wanted to talk about. Obviously, they had the key injury to the quarterback, which comes at a very bad time. It's tough for the guys. But when your quarterback gets injured, your best player, the Heisman hopeful, goes down, it affects the product on the field. And as we saw, they won all their games. There's no question. They were the ACC champions. But having that guy go down is the first strike. The second strike becomes money. And there's nothing that we love more than dollars. So if FSU would make it, that means Alabama wouldn't have made it. I'm going to read off just ticket prices from this championship past weekend. The SEC average ticket was $696, Big 12, $296, the Big 10, $199, Pac-12, $160. Unfortunately, the ACC was $147. SEC is not getting left out of the college football playoffs. So much to the point where I thought Georgia would even make it over Texas. Now, obviously, Texas beat Alabama early in the season, week 2. Alabama's quarterback was still learning. He got benched right after that. So I really think it's an unfair advantage to compare the Alabama team to the one from week 2 to the one that we face now. I think Georgia should have made it. Now, that's splitting hairs. I think Florida State was definitely out just because of the product that they would unfortunately not be able to put onto the field. They had an unbelievable run. They have a great team. We'll see if they do it back-to-back weeks. Texas has maybe the biggest fan base in the country. I think that's another factor that plays into it. They are going to travel well. They are going to be loud, and they're going to be playing top dollar wherever they go. Michigan, obvious Michigan, Washington, and their quarterback, beat top talent throughout the season. They deserve to be in. I just think that if we were going purely off of economics, Georgia would somehow probably be in. Washington most likely would have been out in that case, but they were deserving. They found a way into the tournament, and that's all that matters. Now, let me get into some of my predictions. Michigan, Alabama. If you're Michigan, you would be cheering for Florida State to get into college football playoffs because that's a much easier out than Alabama. I think Alabama may be slightly favored in that one. Maybe it's a pick 'em. Maybe Michigan's slightly favored. I like Alabama. Now I think Texas beats Washington. I think we have a rematch, Texas versus Alabama in the college football finals. That one can go any which way, but I think Alabama reigns supreme. They have come a long way this season. I think Alabama ends up being your future champion of college football. I know it's not fun, but look, they have this thing figured out. It'll be 7 rings. I heard one of the guys in the locker room talking about it today. That is pretty impressive. So I'm sorry, Florida State. I'm sorry to Georgia. I mean, Georgia was number 1 in the country, 2 consecutive national championships. They lose 1 game. It just so happened to be the last game, and they get booted from the college football playoffs. I think that is a little crazy. But if Texas never beat Alabama early in the season, I think Georgia would have gotten in. There's just no way you could leave Texas out if Alabama made it, and the SEC champion has to make it. Speaking of college football, we are going to do our Pughney Badger of the Week as a college football player. Levi Williams, Utah State quarterback Levi Williams, is giving up his final year of eligibility to join the Navy SEALs. In his last game in college football, he had 5 touchdowns. But he wants to pursue something bigger than himself and sports, and no other way to do that than protecting our country. And I'm going to give this quote because I want to make sure I get it right. He said, "I just want to be there in a spot where I can protect this great country, where we get to play football with the freedom to do that. I think this is the best country in the world, so I'd like to keep it that way and protect it as long as I can." Levi, man, I get goosebumps listening to that. I wish I would have had the stones to go and do what you're doing. Giving up a year of college eligibility after having a 5 touchdown performance and going to join the Navy SEALs is unprecedented. I think there was actually a player from Alabama that did it and joined. Maybe it was the Army Rangers back in the day. But Levi, you are the Pughney Badger of the Week. Hats off to you. The utmost respect. You are a legend, and we appreciate what you're going to do for our country. This segues perfectly into the next thing I want to talk about, which is my cause, my cleats. Every year, the NFL allows us to wear a cleat that is near and dear to our heart, that represents a cause that, we feel the need to support. And this year, I am wearing my cleats for the C4 Foundation, which is a foundation that provides resources and support available to active duty Navy SEALs and their families through neuroscience programs and different relationship building and support networks. They help our soldiers, specifically Navy SEALs. They have a ranch in San Diego, which I visited this past year, and it's unbelievable. It was created in honor of Charles Keating IV. C4 he was lovingly known by friends and family that died in 2016 and May 3rd of 2016, and heroically gave his life defending freedom in Iraq. I've met his family. I've met his brothers in arms. They do an unbelievable job at the C4 Ranch. It is a beautiful place right outside of San Diego. So if there are any Navy SEALs out there, definitely reach out to us or here at Net Worth or C4 to go out there and take your family. It's unbelievable. So what we're going to do is we're going to wear these cleats. I'm going to drop a picture of them below. We are also going to be donating these cleats after, and I'll give you guys more information on that. It is something that I've seen firsthand, the impacts that I've seen firsthand. C4 was an amazing man. Unfortunately, I never got to meet him, but I see the presence and what he has done and how people talk about him. So salute to you guys. That is something that I have an honor of doing, and I'll be wearing Monday Night Football against the Green Bay Packers. Touched on it last week about the Packers. They're coming off another win. Super impressive. They're a great team, great defensive line. Don't have to say much more on it. It's going to be a great game on Monday night. I need all of our fans out there packing MetLife Stadium. As crazy as this season has been, we are only 2 games out of the wild card spot. A win against Green Bay would really help our chances. So I need all my Giants fans out there on Monday Night Football. All right, so to wrap up this episode, I told you guys we would do a giveaway, and the giveaway we shall do now. I'm going to do 2 giveaways based on the last 2 subscriber goals that we hit, 500 and 1,000. We'll do the next one at 2,000, and we are going to be giving out Net Worth game balls. I got some signed balls that I will be signing, Giants footballs that we will be giving to people that this is what you have to do to win. You have to be subscribed to the channel, and you have to like and comment on this video. We will take the comments and we will select one at random. Doesn't matter how long the comment is, how many you post. We will select 2 comments from this video right here, and the winners will be announced next week. We'll be communicating with you guys through all social media platforms, so make sure you're following us on Instagram, X, and TikTok. That's it for this week's episode. It's been amazing. I mean, recapping this video, first interview I've ever done, so bear with me on that one. We've gotten over 1,000 subscribers in 10 episodes, which is truly remarkable. Shout out to you guys. I appreciate all of the support. All the questions that have come in, don't worry, we will continue to get to them. Hopefully, we'll be able to continue to do these giveaways so we keep hitting our goals. Remember, I can't bring guests on this channel if we're small. We need to grow. So make sure you tell a friend to subscribe. Subscribe. I never thought I'd be out here doing it, but it allows me to continue to do these podcast weeklies, do these interviews. I love that I get to learn too. So along with you guys, we continue to grow. We continue to get better. With that, leave a comment, leave a like. Remember to be kind to one another, and I will see you next week.
I'm really him, don't believe me, come and see me. Got 3 wishes from my genie, now I'm on your local TV. Y'all on tour, got demons, say she wanna come and see me. When I'm in a local city, I'm like, pause though, please step aside so they can see me. And I walk up in this like, yeah, I'm really him. Talking my shit like